We're now on page 15 of your working file, the subject of sizing, or we could call it resizing if you like. Well, basically, whenever you select an object, whether it be a piece of text or an object down here, on the property bar here, varying properties about that object will be displayed. In this case, we can see the typeface, point size, but we can also see the horizontal length and height. So 100 millimeters wide, which is about 4 inches, and 25 millimeters high, which is about 1 inch. We can manually type some values in here if we need to, or the way you will most of the time work is to work with the options you can see here, and that is that you select your object and the resizing handles appear around the outside. There are two types. In each corner we have the scaling handles. In other words, if I click on one of those corner handles and I begin to drag out or inward, as you can see, the piece of text is resizing perfectly. In other words, the relationship between the horizontal and the vertical remains the same. We're just sizing up or sizing down. We don't lose proportion. Now, you'll notice as I'm dragging on that handle that the object is anchored at the opposite corner. So if I select this handle, click and drag, you can see that the object is anchored in that corner there. So always remember that the opposite corner will remain fixed and you'll resize out from that corner. We can change the anchor point by using this option here, Shift. If I want to make the anchor point center, I simply put my finger on the Shift key, and now you can see it's fixed in the center, and I'm resizing or scaling up or down from the center. Okay, and that can be quite handy to use. Okay, if I want to, I can type a value in up here. Now, it's very important that if I want to keep the perfect scaling, the perfect relationship between horizontal and vertical, I must turn the lock on, the lock ratio. If I don't, I'll type a value in here. So I type 100, hit enter. As you can see, it's simply stretched horizontally, so now it is no longer in proportion. So Control Z, I'll undo that. However, if I turn that little lock on, and now I type a value in of 100, hit enter, as you can see, I've returned back to that relationship we started with, 100 wide by 25 millimeters high. Pretty important to remember that one. Well, that's perfect scaling. Okay, now what I will do is I'll shrink this down a little, because just to help you see what I'm about to show you, constrain allows you, if you hold your finger on Control, stretch out, it'll do nothing until you're exactly double the size. And again, exactly double the size. So constraining to perfect double sizes. Okay, just remember that. That's quite handy as well. Well, moving on, looking at the other handles, we have side handles. Well, of course, these do the obvious thing, and that is that stretch horizontally. So the fixed point is the other side, the anchor point, and as we stretch out, we're just simply stretching horizontally. Notice on the property bar, only the horizontal value changes. And that, of course, that's the same for both sides, I should say. The other side, always the opposite side, is anchored. Well, the same applies in the vertical, of course. The opposite side is anchored, and we can resize vertically. Well, of course, don't forget that these two options here do apply as well. So if I want to fix my anchor point in the middle, in fact, why don't we just undo that, Control Z, until I get back to my perfect scale, which I want to do. Now, from the center, if I put my finger on Shift and use a side handle, you can see it's now anchored in the center. Looks a bit like a squeeze box when we do it that way, doesn't it? Now, in the same fashion, I'll move this over here. Constrain waits until you are double the size. So finger on Control, and as soon as I'm double the size, it snaps to double that size. Okay? So just remember that. Now, finally, if I grab this object here, I'll pop that up there and out the way. I'll grab the ship, and I'll also grab what I call the time tunnel. What we have here is an object that is actually a blend of two basic objects. So if I go to View and Simple Wireframe mode, as you can see, there's one ellipse on top and one ellipse underneath, and then a whole range of ellipses. I'll go back to, say, Wireframe. A whole range of ellipses are then drawn by using the special effect to create the final result. So effectively, there are two objects here. I can click in the middle and I can resize the whole object exactly how we've just learnt, Or what I can do is select just the top object and resize that. And that affects the look of the time tunnel, as you can see. Just like that. Now, if you want to select the bottom one, draw a marquee around the bottom one, move that where you want. I'll put my finger on the Shift key and resize that right out. And as you can see, I can play with that and do all sorts of things. So what I want you to do is select these objects, and you may find you want to squash something like that down, push it in there a little bit, stick it on top. It can actually make the ship look like it's coming outside of the time tunnel. So go ahead and play with that. Also feel free on the property bar to type in some scaling values. So if I were to, for example, scale that to 100% with the lock on, hit enter, that's what my ship would look like. Control Z, I'll just undo that. Play with that and move on to the next lesson.